Welcome to the channel and this new series for Workers and Resources Soviet Republic. Before we get into the main introduction, I just want to talk about two things. First thing is I want to emphasize that this series is not going to replace the Great Divide series that's currently running. This is intended to be a regular series running alongside that. So there'll be no official release schedule for this series. It would just be a block. When I record videos, I'll be putting them out. And of course, the second one is that I want to emphasize there's absolutely no gameplay in this video. If you want to get straight into the gameplay, what I recommend is that you move on to part one, which will be published at exactly the same time as this video. Now, if you've decided to stay, welcome. This introduction is going to consist of two parts. The first part, I'm going to talk about the reasons for making this series and also what we're going to try and accomplish in it. And then the second part, I'll give you a bit of a tour of the map, talk about the options of strategies that will help us build a successful economy. So why am I actually starting another series alongside my current series? And the reason for that is that this stems from a comment that somebody posted, asking me to take a look at the map and consider for a Let's Play. And the map that was suggested is a populated map with very minimal resources. And I'm going to be completely honest, when I first looked at it, I thought this doesn't really fit with the way I like to play the game. Because if any of you watch my channel, you'll be aware that I like to build a small starter town in the corner, which most people do. But then I like to build all the buildings out rather than just plopping down buildings using the auto build. So my initial reaction wasn't overly positive, but at the same time, I thought, well, I've got to do the map justice. I've got to look into it and look at the options of doing it. And I have to admit, the more I looked into it, the more I investigated it, the more I started to think, well, there's a challenge here. Then I remembered something that a friend of mine said to me a long time ago, that the best way to improve your gameplay on a game that you've been playing for some time is to move out of your experience and come at it from a different angle. And then I thought, yeah, maybe I am being a bit too focused on a single strategy. So then I started looking at the other options that I could use to solve the map. And that kind of broadened my horizons a little bit. And I found it very interesting. So I've decided to go ahead with this series with the objective of building an economy. And it's going to be a trading economy. My normal objective is to build a self-sufficient economy without all the different industries placed across the map. This series is going to be very much about, can you build a efficient economy, but not by building all the industries? And probably the best way to describe it is that we're going to need to build an economy that can afford to import the raw resources, even in the late game when they start getting expensive, create added value products and then export those to make a profit. I mean, to be honest, there is no economy in the world that is completely self-sufficient, no matter how people like to think about it. All economies rely on other economies somewhere else in the world to supply either specific commodities or raw resources. So in some ways, we're going to try and create a real-world economy. And I think that's probably enough of the objectives of the game. So what we're going to do is go in here, and I'm just going to show you the map. And it's called the Baltic Coast Islands here. This map is actually created by Black Hole Satrap. It's based on a real-life area in Estonia, so it's a very flat map. It's got lots of islands, and of course you can see the little symbol in the bottom right-hand corner of the icon. It's a populated map. So let's just click on Select Map, and you can see it's actually called Map Location Map Random Map. Why is it called? Helps if I actually select the map, doesn't it? Okay, we've selected the right map. We've now got Baltic Coast Islands. We're coming in. I'm glad I checked that. And you can see it's a populated map. And we're going to play hard difficulty. Now, this is where I'm going to digress from my normal start. Because the challenge of this map, and I think it's quite important to emphasize that this map is going to take me into completely uncharted territory, because I've never ever done a populated map. I've never played on a map with minimal resources, and I mean minimal resources. You'll see it once I give you the map tour. And so therefore, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to go for easy cash. Not hard here, easy cash, sorry. I'm not concentrating. And so we're going to go for easy cash, because we're going to keep everything else on hard settings. Of course, for reasons for recording videos, we're going to turn the night-day cycle off. We've got seasons there, building fires. We're going to enable global events, and we are going to start in 1960. And you can see by the length of the population bar that we're going to start with a fairly big population. So we're just going to come in here and we're just going to start the map. And what I'm going to do is just pause the map. And I think probably the best way to show you the map straight away is we'll just look at the, on the mini map. I'll draw it to full size. And you'll see that this is a map with a lot of water in it. We're only playing on half of the map as a landmass with a few islands off the offshore. And if you see by the dark patches here, we've got 3 major towns. Now, when I first started looking at how I could solve the problems here, I did watch Licky Gaming and Party Elite because they play on populated maps. So I thought what I'll do is I'll see how they get started. Their general solution is to start on the edge of the map near a border and then build an economy and then move out to fill in the rest of the map. But this map presents a very unique challenge in the sense that the real settlements are in the center here, and you've got 3 main towns running up the coastline here, and then what you've got also is a few small villages scattered around. Now, my first consideration with this map was to say, right, we'll just ignore these towns and just start like I normally do down in the corner. But of course the real challenge is trying to build around these towns here in the center of the map, and that does present some very different challenges, and we will be zooming in. But first, what I want to do is show you the minimal resources. You can see the coal is virtually non-existent, and I spent a lot of time looking around to try and find a good source, but truthfully the coal and the iron here and the oil is very much the subsistence income. And the coal and the oil, I don't really think it's worth trying to develop a coal or oil industry on this map, which is going to present quite an interesting challenge for getting started and getting our construction work up. Now, the iron is a little bit more forgiving. If I come down here, we'll just draw this down a little bit. What you'll see is along this coastline here, and if I come in here, if I come along the coastline, because this gives you an idea of how minimal the resources are. There are some green patches here, I can assure you. It's just a question of finding them. There you can see it's getting a little bit more patches in this area, and here's some of the more denser areas here, which could be exported. But I have put mines over this, and at the best you're getting is 30–40% if you're really lucky. That also applies down onto this edge here, which is probably the area that's a bit more interesting. You've got a little bit of a patch here, some more here. So there is enough iron on the map here to get, you could say, a minimal iron production going, especially if you build a bridge over here, which brings back memories of my Canada series. So it's possible that we could build an iron industry in the long term. And just to kind of emphasize the oil situation. And if we come into here, if I can come back here, we'll find the oil thing. What you'll see is that, I mean, we are in the area where it says there is oil, but what you'll find is that the amount of oil here is very minimal. And this is why I'm saying, you can see here, there's a patch here. And if I built an oil rig here, you're talking 5% production for the oil rig. And to be honest, I just don't think it's going to be worth the infrastructure and cost to actually do that. Actually, while I'm just looking at this, I just want to turn off the auto builds, and we'll come to residential. Right, that's turned off as well. Just click there, turn off get citizens as well. I need to do that while I'm looking at it. So that's the resources. This is the map. Let's just go and show you the towns now. Effectively, what we got is 3 towns, each with their own port, and this town actually has a rail connection as well. And apologies for the names, I think this is Kusa, and I'm not sure whether these are real Estonian towns or not, or whether these are map generated names. If any of you know whether these towns actually exist in Estonia, feel free to chuck it in the comments. And then another one up here is we got is one called Kalas. Now this has got no rail connections, and the only real way into this town is by a harbour or a very long track along the road. But I'll talk a little bit more about the shipping later on. And then right up on the top end of the map here, we got another small town, which again has got a harbour that's actually connected to a warehouse. But I've done some test play with harbours, and to be honest, it doesn't really work The problem is the sheer amount of time it takes to bring the goods in. If you imagine that the actual coastline over here to trade with is a long way away, so it takes ships a phenomenal amount of time to sail out there. I mean, this harbour will be useful in the long term because we're right close to the NATO border here. So in the mid to late game, we might be able to bring this harbour into action for quick exports to NATO countries. Then if I show you down in the south here, or the lower part of the map, not the south. Again, we've got a harbour here that's connected to an open store. But again, the trip to take for a ship to leave here and get to this border over here is just not viable. So that means that the solution for this map is very much orientated about trying to get these towns set up. And another interesting thing is this railway line. If I zoom right in, and if any of you are familiar with the game, you'll see that we've actually got a wood-based railway track here, which is only got a capable of top speed of 70 kilometers. Is it 70 kilometers or miles? Yeah, 70 kilometers an hour. And if I follow the track through, what you'll see is the track runs down through here, and I mean, you can see it's literally traversing almost half the map. And because it doesn't go the direct angle, this is a very long way round. And I've actually timed it with a train doing 70 kilometers an hour. And it takes between 4 and 5 days for a train to get from the border crossing up to that town there. So it's going to be an interesting challenge. Now, one of my initial strategies for doing this map was to use tourism. But now, I don't know if this is intentional or whether it's just purely accidental. But if you pick up tourists at the border down here, this crossing here, and then run them up to this town here, because this is the rail connection. Now, tourists will only travel for 12 hours. And what actually happens is if a passenger train comes up here, the 12 hours expires just about around this area here. So my initial strategy of creating this into a tourist centre can't really work at the moment because we can't get the tourists in. You run them up there and then they just disappear from the train when you get to about here. Now, my next solution was to upgrade the track, but that is very expensive, and even with $2 million and 10 million rubles, that's not really the way I want to go. So our initial challenges are going to be twofold. First one is we're going to need to get a pretty strong construction industry up and running, and the second one is to generate enough of an income that will ensure that when the 10 million rubles runs out. And probably another thing you want to see here with this map is that it is very flat, so we're not going to be doing much terraforming. And I think, as you can see here, we've got lots of trees, and because the land is flat, a lot of our early income is going to be based on forestry products and farming. Because you can see there's a direct hint here with the farms around the towns themselves. Although, to be honest, I won't be building farms in the suggested areas simply because I'm going to want to be able to expand these towns out, because that is going to be the strategy. The initial focus is going to be very much on this town here to try and preserve the population, and also somehow keeping this town going as well. So what I want is to get these two towns working together so that they will act as an economic unit, is probably the polite way of saying it. Although we've got a very long mud road here, which is interesting. Virtually all the roads on the map are mud, which doesn't help matters. Now, as for this town up here, this town is just too remote to be functional. I mean, the train journey is very long, and from a perspective of trucks, even with these little gravel roads here, it's just not viable to bring a truck all the way out here from the border crossing, especially as we've got no border crossings on this side of the map. This is another feature, is if I show you here, there's no land border crossing here to exploit. If I come down to this one here, you'll see there's some rail crossings here, but no crossings, but no border crossings. So what we've actually got is a crossing here. Now this is the only rail link onto the map, and you can see it's only got a single track on it, so we're gonna have to work hard to develop this. And I think that is an indicator that in the long term we will have to get the shipping up and running. Now there is another land connection up here, which is going to be quite important for my long-term strategy. If we come up here, you see we've got a mud road but no border crossing. And of course we can't border crossings. So effectively what we've got is 2 border crossings on the mainland. And I think there's a border crossing over here on this island. But we can't really exploit this until we've managed to get across the water here. And of course in some ways that then leads on to the shipping element as well. You can see this road literally goes nowhere. And I think that's probably enough of a map tour, and I think it gives you an idea of the challenge. In fact, just landing here is another one. An element of the challenge of this game is the fact that there are no gravel patches as such inland. All the gravel is going to have to be extracted along water's edges as well, which is going to be interesting, especially as the gravel quarries themselves aren't overly productive. I take my hat off to the creator of this map. They've really posed a very interesting challenge, and it is going to push me outside the boundaries. And I think just to finish this video off, I'm just going to talk about the broad strategy of how we're going to solve this map. This area here is very interesting, and what I'm going to do is build a big industrial town here because it's close to the iron. And more importantly, if I show you here, we've got bauxite, which is in deep concentration. That means we can get an aluminium industry going. And we've also got uranium. So there's a possibility that we can get some high value products from the uranium mine. And that is one of the reasons why I want to keep this town going, because the uranium is actually up here. And if I show you the price of the nuclear fuel, if we can produce nuclear fuel in this area and then export it, getting 104,000 rubles per ton of nuclear fuel will be a very good money earner. This is going to be my strategy for the map. We're going to try somehow to preserve the populations in these 2 towns here, make them into some kind of economic hub. We will use the railway to export. And what I'm thinking is to have a construction materials industry up here, because another issue is the sheer complexity of importing various items to this area if you want to build anything. And of course the big complication is asphalt and concrete. So what I'll be doing is building a construction industry here, which will then allow me to upgrade this road so we can connect these roads together. We're probably and of course we're going to have plenty of farms, a bit of forestry. And for anyone who's familiar with the game, the heating will be from trees. I'm not going to be using coal-fired heating. And the power situation as well, because of there's no coal. I mean, obviously to begin with, we're going to import the power from this side of the map, which means we're going to have to lay some very long power cables. But my power source in the long term, if I show you here, and of course I'm going to be using mods. And if I come to power plants, what we're going to be doing is using hydroelectricity and geothermal. So these are going to be my 2 power sources, but you can see these are quite big and expensive to build. So the actual power supply on this map in the long term will be hydroelectric and geothermal. I think that's enough of an introduction to the map and the general strategy. I think this is going to be quite an interesting challenge. And what I will say, this is either going to be a very long, interesting series where we experiment. We'll have all sorts of unusual elements of the game, including mods. In fact, I might make mods a feature of this series. Or the alternative is it could be a very short series because I'm going to be completely outside of my realm of experience. And I'm liable to get many things wrong, especially with respect to managing the population. So if you decide to follow the series, feel free to chuck comments in and tell me where I'm going wrong, any suggestions based on your experience doing populated maps. So this is where I'm going to leave it. Hope you enjoyed this introduction, and until next time, whatever you do, enjoy your gaming.